So let's just pretend for a moment that we're building our stuff. We're building our project here, and this is the white translucent version. So if you would like to download that file and unzip it and orbit around a little bit, we'll take a look at some of the stuff that's in here. You can see that the floors are marked. So this is a quick indicator that this is a 4-story building with 4 floors, etc. I've used guidelines to start to establish a grid there. I've started to pop up some different things on corners, or you can even see kind of join buildings together and start to display out just a few architectural features, but not replacing the work that an architect does. But if you have goals for the building, how the building looks in that downtown context, then as a planner, you have an opportunity to help establish and make those goals transparent. And so, so while we are not replacing the work of architects, we are making clear suggestions about the future of the building. So, on the other hand, if I open the other one, let's see, sketch plan, you can see that I am starting to build off of one of our hand-drawn plans. So this is a previous year. We've got parking structure here. We've got some residential. We've got a couple of interesting buildings on our 2 favorite, if you will, parking lots at the Walnut intersection of Walnut and Charles. And we have an alternative for what's on that particular site. So scenario-wise, your work might look like something like this. It might look something like this, but I think what could be interesting now is to think a little bit further and say, let's say we've got a building going, and I just select all of that from the left, and I right-click it and start to make it a group, or further yet, make it a component. And we can do that with a right mouse click by making it a component. Because a component means that we can import it very well into another file. So if you do a left sweep over a building, you'll see it's already a component, but I just want you to save it as a component again. And save it to the desktop and give it a unique name. So give it just a unique name. I know it's already a component, but this model is exactly what your particular model would look like. If you were doing a left sweep over the whole building, making it a component and saving it as its own file, that means you can bring it into another Sketchup file and have some fun with it. So I just would like you to save that as a new component and give it a new name. So like Urban Building 4 or 5 or something like that. Just save that to your desktop. Let's go over to the other one. These 2 are already saved as components. So we just save those as a unique name to your desktop. They've already loaded into SketchUp, but this will mimic the process by which in your original model, how you will create that building as a component. So we'll just give them unique names. Now, a couple things have happened here. This particular sketch is not geolocated, is it? The source is a drawing. It's not been placed on Earth. So it lacks some information in terms of where it is in the world. Okay? But we've generated stuff from the sketch that we can then create components out of and bring it into a geolocated model. Okay? So let's do that. What were the implications for the geolocation, that why we didn't use Trimble's geolocation in the first place? Why did we not use that? What was our purposes for not using Trimble's aerial imagery? You remember why? Why did we use Google Earth imagery instead of Trimble's aerial imagery?
Because Google Earth is more updated?
Yeah, because it's much more current aerial imagery and it's much higher resolution. So, okay. All right, so if we make an entirely new model, both. And we go to File, Geolocation, Add Location. And we go to Muncie. You have to type in Muncie or select the region. And we zoom in to our downtown. We will notice that Trimble's imagery is, whoa, woefully behind. What's missing here? Where did the hotel go? Okay, so we can see that Digital Globe has a much older aerial image. So this is why we didn't use Digital Globe's imagery. You can see construction. This is actually pre-streetscape, and there's no hotel or parking garage present. However, this is still helpful for us to geolocate our model. So I will select a region somewhere in here, grab, and bring it into SketchUp. The other reason we didn't select it is because it is not a very high quality or resolution. Okay? However, you have hopefully made your model using high resolution imagery or off of your basically your illustrated plan. If you grab components now, you can start placing them into a geolocated environment. Okay? So let's go with the first one. We'll go to Import. And we just made a name for our new component, right? Urban Building 8. And it plugs right in. Now, why did it do that? Why did it do that? Because I made the model with a geolocated Google Earth image, which was geolocated. That's why it's coming in perfectly. That's fine. Case in point. So that's one sort of case. Let's import another one. 6. Oh, all right. D has located that as well. It falls in perfectly in its intended place. Cool beans. But let's suppose it doesn't do that. This is from the other model. All right. If it's not geolocated and it's not specific, it's just going to come in like this and float over the site. And you go, where do I put this? Where is there available space? Wilbur. So we could obliterate DeFerveran's parking lot. There's some things we could do here, but so we'll just place it there for now and go, well, there's some implications for the park. But a couple of tricks I would like to show you now. Under the scale tool, if you want to mirror a building or invert a building, if you grab the red scale about opposite point, hold the shift key, it will scale it down. If I grab that corner and go, whack, I can mirror the building over. Look at that. Check it out. Looks like it's doing yoga or something. There it is, okay? Or I can even scale it in a little bit. Now, that changes your square footage. So you got to keep abreast of how this playing around with components this way changes your percentage of square footage. So as the real estate thinker that you are, you're making something fit onto a site, but you're also having implications for your total rentable space and the like. Now, if you know that, and you can decrease that by a certain percentage, or just have a sense for how big that footprint is, you're golden. Another option is once you scale the building and place it onto the site appropriately, you can explode that component and start measuring its parts and pieces. So if I take the component now and explode it, there's a few things I can start to do with it. Now here's kind of a cool thing. If you bring a component into a model, you can edit that component isolated from the rest of the model. So, well, I want to make changes to this, I can do that right here, and it is completely isolated from everything else. If there are multiple applications of the component, let's say I put another one in here, and I choose Edit Component. This is kind of fun. So I can click on that and then go Edit Component, Edit Component. Any change that I make to this will be updated on every instance of the component. Okay? All right. right, let me try to see if I can figure this out. Right mouse click, edit component, make a change, and you'll see that it is updating both instances of the component. All right, so if you bring in a component from the 3D warehouse or from something you've made, you place 20 of them on the site, and you want to make a change to all 20, you can do that. You do it once. Beautiful, right? All right? Once, as opposed to making the change 20 times. If you don't want this to happen to all instances of the component, the right mouse click also allows you to make unique. All right? So if you brought in 20 of these into your plan and you want this one to be slightly different, you can make that unique without affecting the other components. Good versatility, good time saving. When you start to build a personal buildings library, these are the time savers that can happen for you, okay? This is also why I'm advising you to build the white model first, because you can go back in and paint the zoning colors the way you want them on the component, not on the whole model. And then import, export that line, okay? Make sense? Time saving, versatility. Cool, all right. So I have my friend over here. Obviously that would be a major effect on the site itself. But if I were to place a copy of this building over here behind Muncie Music Center, less eggs to break to make that omelet, right? Nothing in the way per se. We just have to address the railroad or something like that. I could also take that building, grab it, and turn it around and replace it as well. Lots of things I can do there. And just kind of push this into place. Keeping in mind that Muncie Music Center does probably need a little bit of space back there. And or I make some modifications from there. Okay, so once we start building components in our personal library, we can start to place multiple copies of them. We can make changes to all of them, or we can make them unique and make changes only to that spot. So.
Question about the make unique.
Yep.
Does it then no longer become a part of that original component? If you wanted to edit the whole group, would it not edit that one unique building?
It would not edit that. If you are no longer interested in having that be a component, just like we explode it, right? We explode it and then you can do anything to it you want. For instance, if you were to bring in a parking garage from the 3D warehouse, that is something that you will want to explode, paint white, and then make a component again. So those are implications for that. Okay. Are we ready to see this in Google Earth? Let's find out. Let's find out what it does. All right, so we go to File, Export 3D Model. We select Google Earth File KMZ. KMZ is a Google Earth file that Google Earth will open. We have to give it a unique name. Class 11.6. There are some options. You can export hidden geometry, probably not a good idea. Credits, probably not. Okay, so these options are important when you are bringing in stuff from 3D Warehouse. You explode it, you change things. You probably don't want the hidden geometry there, and you probably don't need to preserve the credits unless you are dealing with a potential copyright issue. If you're using components from the 3D Warehouse, I encourage you to cite the sources somewhere in your documentation, just to communicate to your potential viewer of your portfolio or board that yes, I didn't make this parking garage, and that you're academically honest about that. Otherwise, we're just going to assume that this is all your work. So these options are important just for those two potential implications there. Then I go export. And that has been exported to the desktop. I will then go to Google Earth Pro, provided I have processing power, and simply go to Open. And I will look for that KMZ file. Provided I can put it in the right place. Let's try that again. Export 3D model, KMZ, desktop. That's better. Always be sure to know where you're exporting something. Back to Google Earth, File, Open, Class 11.6. Google Earth will fly or parachute directly to the site and will give you this. Okay? This is with the terrain and 3D buildings turned on. What's going on? What sorts of implications do we have to consider now? What's going on? What constraints do we have? What sorts of things do we need to think about?
Mine went to Boulder, Colorado.
Okay. Boulder's a nice place. Okay. All right. What sorts of implications do we want to think about here? What are these? What's this? What are those? Those are the existing trees poking through our building. So that is an implication, right? So this is telling us something here, things that we need to think about. All right. Because the 3D geometry for the existing trees is coming through. So either we need to adjust our model, or we need to Photoshop it out, or we need to think about, do I really want to export to this three-dimensional view? The other thing is the curve. Notice that the curve is disappearing here. This is because there is a slight terrain change on that particular site. So again, this is not perfect by any means. Is it perfectly evaluative? Yes. Can you show it to a client and make decisions with it? Yes. But this is probably not presentation quality because of the mishmash or the merging of geometries that are on the site, Google Earth versus Google Earth. It also means that this view is not going to work if you're tearing buildings down. If you are removing buildings, that they will still appear. And if your model doesn't happen to somehow swallow them, like Jonah and the whale, your existing buildings will also appear colluding with that site. So to avoid that, we turn off terrain in 3D buildings, and we get a much different concept that's probably easier to read as well, right? So if we can get in here, we see that the two-dimensional layer that we've been using all class is pretty accurate, right? So it has the hotel and the parking garage. We can see that the streetscape is still under construction based on that. This is what we've experienced in class all the way through. Of course, Google Earth is going to continually refreshing the imagery as it continues to change. But we can see now our proposal is showing up in 3D. The existing is showing up in 2D. If you were to remove buildings, you would essentially be covering them up. But again, the implications are such that I might be interested in including the curve. Okay? I might be interested in including trees. Maybe. And then exporting to this two-dimensional view in order to give the most clear objective of my proposal, my real estate proposal. Another thing, Google Earth simplifies the buildings, right? They don't look like SketchUp buildings anymore. So you want to think about, in terms of the aerial perspective that you want to include in your portfolio and in your storyboard, should I use the land use colors or should I use the white model? Those implications are also things to consider, okay? So if this were to be a building on this site, I would probably want to include curb all the way up to here to cover up the existing trailers and things like that that are here. I may, as you can see here, the curb does cover that. That works pretty well here, etc. So you may also consider including the trees. Not sure. The other option, of course, is to place the trees in Photoshop afterwards. So layer management. What has been our most important thing about Google Earth, about SketchUp and Google Earth, comes back again to layer management. Having things on the appropriate layers that you can turn on and off before you export. So if I want to be able to turn on the curbs, I can have those. If I want to turn off the trees, I can do that. So layer management is paramount when you're building your SketchUp models. And remember that you can always change the layer of something by changing the entity info. So that's what it starts to look like in an aerial view. There are other ways to do this as well, though. If you are removing buildings or you are facing that particular issue of collusion or occlusion, in the case of trees and buildings and things like that, there are other ways to do that. So it involves basically isolating different views and then sandwiching them in Photoshop. But there are other ways to get around it. It just involves a lot more work. So that's the basics of opening a KMZ file in Google Earth. Processing power. Yes. I don't recommend, here we are floating in space. Oh my. Oh, that's fun. Ladies and gentlemen, we are floating in space. So processing power, all these different things start to have implications for your work as well. But that is what a basic export of Google Earth looks like from the aerial view. All right. Now let's think about some street level imagery. So we have our stuff down here. SketchUp has a couple of features, including the position camera, look around and walk around, that are in this portion of the master toolbar. If you don't have the master toolbar open, do open it. It is very handy to have that available. So good to have those things open. And so if we take our scale figure that is positioned here, we will create a station point for that person to stand. And then, for instance, if we were going to have them stand in the middle of the roundabout, it'll take us right down to the view here. It'll automatically go to the eyeball, and then we will look around, and this is what we are seeing from street level as we look up, as we look down. Everything here is basically at a 5 or 5.5 foot horizon line. So this is accurate to what we would see in street view. It, however, is an extremely difficult view to work with. So if we hit the feet here, then we can, using the mouse, we can move back, we can move forward, we can walk around just a little bit. But basically the station point has not changed. To exit the view, we just zoom extents and we go back and orbit into the model itself again. So try that a couple of times. Grab our little position camera scale figure and drop him or her down into the park or down onto the ground and look around a little bit. And sort of look around and see if there's a view that we can work with. To exit the view, we just zoom extents and then orbit back. Any subsequent exporting, by the way, we probably would like to turn off the axes. So we do that under here. We turn off all of the stuff that we don't want to be exported, axes, guides, and the like. Those are good things to not export. But if we go down onto the street, for instance, like down here, we could start thinking about a view that we could use and we could start to make something with. Okay? Corner of a building or something like that. So that's sort of the sidewalk. I think I'm, based on what I'm interested in doing right now, I'm going to pick something right in the middle of the street. So declaiming traffic. Right around this corner here. All right. that might be something that we could use right there. Okay. All right. I think this is a view that we can use. To take this down to Photoshop, okay, I'm going to go to File, Export 2D Graphic. I want a portable network graphic. Give it a unique name. I want it to be a PNG. I click on the options, and I have to make some decisions now. Do I want to use the existing view size, which is pretty good, pretty big? Do I want anti-aliasing, which is a smoothing of edges and curves? Do I want a transparent background?
Is that 3D then?
Yeah, 2D. This is 2D. Give that a unique name. Now that's exported. Hopefully that's exported to the desktop.
Can you go through that one more time?
Yep. File, export 2D graphic. Give it a unique name. Street view looking south. PNG options. Use view size. Transparent background. Export. Okay. So let's go back to Google Earth. Back out. We want to be over here next to the Y, looking the other way. And we need to sort of juggle the quality here a little bit. Back up just a little bit. And put them into position here. That's better. Okay. Set this up. About there. Okay, file, save image, resolution, turn off all the map options, save the image, let's see foreground stuff, and we're ready for Photoshop. All right, so let's go to Photoshop. Let's open first the Muncie foreground stuff. That is a JPEG. So these are some things that we can use as foreground elements. Now we have to learn how to deal with this yellow stripe, so that's something we don't necessarily want. but we do want some of this stuff as foreground elements for our future rendering here. So I'll zoom in just a little bit onto this sort of half of the picture, keeping in mind that I want to keep the foreground elements, but I want to eliminate the background elements. The background elements would be the rose court and deferred veranda. So I'm going to start with the polygonal lasso. There's the lasso, the polygonal lasso, the magnetic lasso. Now I'll start to cut out the foreground elements that I want to use to establish a foreground image for this proposed building. Now, we could get really specific with trees and things like that, or we can simply layer trees in later. I'll go around just a few things here. To establish some foreground pieces. I'm going to do it quickly, just for the sake of demonstration. I won't be as precise as I move forward to a professional situation. I need to cut out the foreground pieces and basically slide my building in between. I'm just going to go a little bit fast here for the sake of the demonstration. Utilities are a reality. Clients don't like to see them. They are a reality. That will cut away. That will create a selection of this, basically this lower half. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, create a new layer. Okay. And then paste it, go under Edit, Paste Special, Paste in Place. All right, so what is this? This is now a foreground and a background. Okay? So the foreground elements, they're going to be in front of the building. We have the existing background. Now, with that still open, we're going to open now our exported image, Street View Looking South PNG, and take a look at it. All right. So it has this little bit of a transparent background. It has a gradient blue because of the template that we used. It also has the imagery here. We may or may not be interested in this foreground imagery. We may or may not be interested in the gradient. So that may be of interest and may not be of interest. But we can use the magic wand tool to just select portions of it and get rid of it if we don't want it. You may be okay with the blue. If not, then the fact that it is a PNG allows us to delete that away and create that transparent background. Deselect. I just want to grab any remaining elements of blue. Deselect. All right. So this is a PNG with a transparent background. We now can grab this and bring it into the secondary layers of our other image. So I go to Select All, copy it to the clipboard, go back to my other image, and paste it in. It's now pasted on top of the other layer. I slide it in between the layers, and there it is now in between two layers. Is it the right size? No. It's massive. It's Godzilla. So we need to transform that particular image. And by using the scale, by holding down the scale key, I can scale that down uniformly and start to think about, all right, I think the building is kind of in there. Is this perfect? No, by no means. but it is a beginning of starting to think about how to place your building proposal into a context. Okay? Is it perfect? No. Okay? Is it the whole building? No. You can see that there are implications for missing pieces over on the left. But you can see it kind of goes, hi, here I am, and it kind of reminds you where the street level is, so I can just kind of tuck it in there and start to say, here is what would happen if we were to develop this building on the site. Okay? Now, that is Google street level imagery, so we have to deal with this annoying stripe somehow, or we have to go take a photo of it ourselves, right? Because we are floating above car level. We're about 8 feet above the ground. So anything we place in here now needs to consider that to be 8 feet above the ground. Now, let's think more about this. Do we like the sky or do we not like the sky? If we don't like the sky, then we need to bring in a new sky and modify the background. So that's something we can do. If I double click on background, it turns it into layer 0, and it means it's now editable. So again, if we're not happy with that Muncie sky, we can basically get in here and start deleting parts of it. And by holding down the Shift key and by changing the tolerance of the magic wand, we can delete things really fast. So if we're not happy with that particular sky, we're just not interested in its implications. So by adjusting the tolerance and by using the Shift key, I can delete large portions of an existing sky. Delete that away. If I go back to Canvas and I download some skies, I can use those as part of my entourage package. So I believe I have a couple of skies downloaded already. Open that in Photoshop. There's a nice sky. Select all. Copy it to the clipboard, go back to this view, make a new layer, drag it to the bottom, paste the sky in. Now, some of our skies and some of our entourage pieces come in with credits attached to them, so we want to avoid those. Basically bring that sky down to the appropriate size. That's too big, right? So we need to bring that down and start working with that. Maybe crop it, work with it, just so it's a more appropriate situation for what we're trying to do. That is a beautiful, of course, dramatic, probably Colorado sky. But it can be kind of stretched or used in that way. It is much different implication for our purposes. It may be overbearing, so if we click on the layer and or we come up to our layer menu, I can change the opacity of that layer and make the sky less severe. Okay, so if you take a sky and bring it down to 40%, it's less severe when you go to the export. Turn on our other layers. Okay, so now we're building up sort of the background and the foreground. You also could take on an artistic interpretation of this. You could make the foreground black and white or grayscale. You could make the sky red or orange or something like that. Take artistic implications in terms of how you want this to appear in your presentation package, and it can push the artistic impressions of your proposed development, but also remind folks that they are looking at a proposal. So sometimes abstraction is our friend when it comes to artistic license and artistic interpretation. So that's a sky layer. Then if we've downloaded the Photoshop Resources zip package, I know I've downloaded it several times myself, so I know I've got a copy in here somewhere. there are a few things already preloaded. So we've got some SketchUp buildings, some early components. We've got even some foreground buildings. We've got people on bikes. We've got couples. We have pets. We have plants. We have some paving materials. We have a few things here. So let's start thinking about how we can use these strategically. So if I look at Old Brick Drive and I open that up, and I select all of it, and copy it to the clipboard, then I can think about that as a new layer. That's not where I want it, but I can bring it to the foreground. Whoa, hold on. Good. See? But with the transform tools, I can start manipulating it and bringing it to my purposes. So if I scale this down significantly, I might think about using this for a portion of a lane. Okay? So that might be something that I could use. All right, so I bring that in here. And because it was taken at eye level, at or near eye level, it could become something that we can use. If not the whole thing, then maybe a portion of it can be used. I'm going to pull that down below the previous layer, go back to layer 1, and start thinking about, well, maybe I'll cut away this here foreground street. I'll just cut that puppy away. Thinking strategically, thinking efficiently, thinking about how many billable hours do I want to spend on this. Okay? This is a way of starting to cut away things and collage things up. So I'll go back to my active layer with the street there, layer 4, and I go back to transform, and there are different things that I can do to it. I can scale it over like so, move it into a position. It looks a little bit weird, but it could be something to include. Okay. Okay. Other things we can do to it under transform: scale, rotate, skew, distort perspective. If we need to change the perspective of that, we can push that. Right? Make it a little bit more realistic. Basically, you are changing the vanishing points of that particular brick image. Right? So changing its implications for how it's viewed there. That may improve it, it may not improve it. Okay? So images like this can be skewed, distorted, and the like. All right, now let's look at our layer hierarchy, start turning on things on and off, and just kind of remembering what we're doing. And help us remember where we're at. And then we can start bringing in other things. Like the group. All right. Now, this is a Google Earth image. We are 8 feet up. As a reminder, I have the rulers turned on and I bring down a guideline to where I think the horizon line is. That is about 8 feet off the ground. That means that no person should be above that line, right? So the people need to be, their eye level needs to be shorter than the cars, right? I mean, that would not work if they were taller than the cars, right? So they need to be down here. Again, we can use transform, scale, rotate, skew, distort perspective, flip, warp, and start thinking about them in the realm of below eye level, because this is a Google Earth image. All right? We can think about new trees as well. Okay, that is a sunny day tree, but placed appropriately, it could cover up the work that we did, or the mistakes that we made, or the efficiencies that we took, shortcuts, if you will, in our cutting out our foreground. Okay, covers it up, right? Now trees are not only for covering things up, but they work really well for covering up efficiencies or shortcuts that we may have taken. But don't get the idea that you can just cover anything up with a tree. It works for a lot of things.
Do you have any tips for perspective on trees?
Yes. So if this is right now a vector smart object, we need to potentially rasterize that layer if we want to make changes to it. Okay. Once that's there, we can transform perspective. We can actually push this around. Okay. So give that a little bit of. All right. So you can push and manipulate these vector smart objects, provided that you rasterize them first. You can adjust their opacity. You can edit them. You can clip the trees. What I like to do is make multiple trees and then edit them a little bit, because they just then look just a little bit different from each other, but you have to rasterize them first. So let's say we duplicate this London plane tree. It now has a couple of copies now. I can move that into place in the left-hand side of my foreground. I will rasterize the layer, so a control click or right mouse click allows me to rasterize that layer. And then I can manipulate that tree from a couple of different ways, either by scaling it, which we could have done already, but what I would like to do is grab the eraser and just crop them or clip them a little bit, kind of fulfill my inner arborist, and just edit them out a little bit, just so these trees don't all look the same. So those are just a few tricks that I use to make the trees seem a little bit different from each other, so they don't all look the same. Okay? Even though they're the same species, if you can make this tree just a little bit different than this tree, the public will not know the difference. They will basically buy the illusion. Other elements that we want to include. Be mindful of the weather, be mindful of the time of day, be mindful of the season. If you have winter people with summer people, it will look confusing. Okay? But you can start to get a sense of character. I don't know if she wants to be standing in the middle of the street or not, but she cannot be at eye level because we are above eye level. So she is slightly below eye level there. And just keep adding stuff. And keep it fairly realistic, though. There's some implications for not being realistic, but we can have a lot of fun, too, at the same time. There are a couple of buildings in here. Sometimes they help to show future development, or on the right-hand side, or things like that. I've included those. There is some controversy about using other people's buildings because of copyright. So just keep that in mind, that there are implications for using other images of other people's buildings just because of architectural copyright laws. One of our firms did sort of get into some trouble for using a French building in one of their design proposals. Other things. Where is that? Okay, so is that Muncie? So sometimes your cutouts need to be modified slightly before you bring them in. So those have implications as well. So, so do be mindful of those, that you may want to modify something slightly before you bring it
Or what would you do, like lasso over that?
in. Yeah, and just paint over the New York State. Yeah. Some of these are bigger than others, and so they all have sort of different properties as they come in. You also want to be mindful of the layer hierarchy, so placing them in the right place so that they don't cover up other stuff are other implications for us to think about as well. They cannot be at eye level. Maybe they'll go back here. They cannot be at eye level. The umbrella might be at 7 or 8 feet, but see how now they can coexist with everything else. Okay. Save that. You have two choices now. I like to save a master file with all of the layers intact. Save that either as a TIFF or as a Photoshop document. Saving the file as either of those options will preserve all of the layers in their order. So Photoshop document. So this is Muncie foregrounds, Muncie stuff. We'll give it a new name now, Muncie stuff. 1106, 2018, PSD. This preserves all of the layers in their current position. We may want to check now in terms of where the layers are and make sure everything's in the right place, but it saves them in their current position. And that just gets you saving now, just so we have those implications. Other things now, we might want to consider some more pedestrians in the background or a crossing. There's other elements that you can grab and download, like crossings and things like that. Lots of cutout material that's out there. Around. We may also be interested in blurring some of our folks. If we aren't interested in the precise details, there are other types of things under the filter blur gallery that allow us to abstract some of our figures. So if we go to blur, motion blur, we can see a distance, we can set an angle and a distance for the number of pixels that our group is now blurred. This is for times in which you don't want a lot of definition of your scale figures or things like that. But the implication of motion can be an artistic effect that can bring interest into the image itself. Sometimes it's just enough just to say, all right, I'm going to blur these a little bit. Again, if we were to group all of these layers as we did before, as I did clumsily before, we could blur all of them at once. So again, Photoshop will save the filters. So if I simply go now to each of the layers and create a motion blur, those will be repeated now under the filter gallery. So some of your scale figures, you may want the impression of motion. Now, these images are from different sources. Some were sunny days, some were not sunny days. This was not a sunny day. It was a gray day. It can cause some confusion in the viewer's mind as to where all this stuff is coming from. Here's a way to correct it. So I'm going to save this image now as a master file. I will then save a copy of it. So I can either export it as an image or I can save a copy of it. So I'll go to Save As, save a copy, turn off the layers possibility. Okay, save as a copy, turn off the layers, and then I will export it either as a TIFF or a JPEG. Photoshop will automatically put copy into your file name. This is a good thing, so you can keep track of a flattened version of the image. Photoshop, because it is a copy, and because we've turned off the layers, will take your layers and sandwich them together. So I will save that now. I'll close out everything else. So I'm using RAM, using processor speed, and I will take a look at my flattened copy version. There. Okay, so the translucent sky that we turned the opacity down, you can see now the decision made in terms of that view there. You can still see the building in the middle ground. We can see all of our foreground elements. But again, they are clearly not taken on the same day or different sources. Here's my solution to that. We go back to the filter gallery. We go to filter gallery and we go to watercolor. Watercolor has a tendency to darken things, but it also has a tendency to simplify things. And it will do this based on the image resolution that's there. So I may have to bump up the image size a little bit. Right now we're at 20 inches at 72. So let's think about a 17-incher at 200 dpi. And we've got a slightly bigger image now. Now I'll go back into the filter gallery, look at the watercolor opportunity, turn up the brush detail, turn the shadow intensity all the way down, turn the texture all the way up. Photoshop will give you a preview of the impending image so that it meets your approval. I'll hit OK. And this is like baking a casserole. You want all the flavors to sort of be melted together. That is what the watercolor filter can do for you, provided that you've selected the appropriate possibilities for what that means. Now you can see everything's kind of darkened, everything's a little bit distorted, but it all kind of looks like it came from the same place. So an artistic filter in that filter gallery has the ability to take images from different sources and look like they belong together. It's like baking a casserole. Individual flavors are still there, but the whole dish kind of works together to make a perfectly Midwestern metaphor for that. So if we step backward or we fade that, we can see that the watercolor filter has taken the ability of bringing together several different image sources and allowed them to coexist. Then we can save, again, remember that we need to sort of keep our file management there, and so we might consider adding such things like filtered or watercolor or something like that in terms of our file names. But that is the method by which we can export massing models from Sketchup, drop them into a context, add entourage, and start to give the public a clear picture of what our development proposals might be. Okay? That completes the class.